G'day, folks. AoS Coach here, and we are talking a preview. And a preview that you all have been bugging me about. Like every time in 4th edition, Maddie, when I put out a video, Slaves to Darkness, is always a bunch of you saying, part the glory, part the glory. And I don't play it. That's part of my challenge. But this little thing has come out, and I'm going to be honest, this is actually pretty exciting for someone who doesn't play Part the Glory. I really enjoyed it. We're going to talk today about this supplement, this what you essentially call General's Handbook on steroids for Path to Glory. It's actually really, really cool. I was surprised from someone who doesn't play Path to Glory. So to do this review, I thought I'd bring someone who does play and does play quite often. It is a person who needs no introduction. Madigan, welcome back. G'day. We're not talking OBR. We are talking Path to Glory. Games Workshop did send me the copy. You know, they're not going to see it, but I'm sure they're going to appreciate the video going out there. If you are thinking about buying the book, consider buying it from Element Games in the UK, Warpfire Minis in the USA, or Gap Games in Australia. Links below. Appreciate the support. Or support us on Patreon on YouTube members. Anyway, Path to Glory. Let's talk about this thing. This thing is thick. Maddie, welcome. G'day. Why should I play Path to Glory? Because you play, I don't. Let's talk about this game system that I can go to my game store and not ask for 2K. Like, why would I play something other than 2K?
So Path to Glory is a living campaign system. When you play Path to Glory, you're taking your army, your little force of troops, and it's growing over time. Your units can get different abilities, as they fight in more battles and get stronger. You can add more units to your force. You can make custom heroes with Anvils of Apotheosis, and you can play with those, and those are super neat. So it's a very fun way to sort of, start small and get a bunch of games in with that slowly growing, evolving force. And also, there's a lot of fun and unique battle plans in here. So if you're tired of, here's your 12 GHB battle plan, stand on circles. A lot of the Path to Glory plans are asymmetrical. A lot of them are very creative. So they introduce a new aspect to the gameplay too.
Yeah, Path to Glory. So like me doing all of my research, I've been like, what is Path to Glory? What's it all about? Why do people play this? Because I'm probably speaking to an audience that has heard about this system, but you don't play it, or you've really dabbled, right? From what I can tell, and Maddie, you tell me how far off I am on this. It is a system where you start off with about 1,000 points. It can be a little higher, it can be a little lower. That's that kind of system. And then you build up your force over time. You're acquiring people and artifacts and injuries and various mechanics, and tell a story that leads up to a point, which is actually the introduction to this. This is a book that is really self-contained. If I give you the high-level summary of what this is, and actually I'll bring up a slide to kind of talk about it. This book is set off in a piece of the Mortal Realms. It's based in Akshi. And what you're going to get in this book, and I'm not going to try to spoil the lore too much, but you're going to get a bunch of things, as Maddie said. You're going to get some rules to be able to gain, for anyone who's played Dungeons and Dragons or some type of system like Mordheim, you gain experience, you gain points, you basically level up certain units. It's got its own mechanic of that in this book. You've got, unique battle plans. You've got ways to customize your weapons based off the Mortal Realms, something called Ember Stone. There's a whole bunch of really cool things here that, as someone who doesn't play it, I'm like, oh, this is actually getting me curious. I want to learn more. I'd love to play it. And I love that it's self-contained. I generally love this. Like, right, I can set up a little campaign with my friends and play it through from start to end. And there's a lot of replayability. Maddie, what was your initial thoughts on what you've seen or how?
So when I cracked this open, at first I assumed it was going to build on the Ascension Battle Pack in the core rules, which is the existing Path to Glory pack that if you've played before, you're probably familiar with. But it's actually a completely new battle pack, and it overhauls everything from how you build lists It adds a bunch of new systems for things like injuries. There's a whole bunch of new paths. The aforementioned weapon boost up. So it's a complete replacement for the Ascension pack, and it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff in here. And it's definitely more in-depth than the Ascension pack. So if you have been playing Path to Glory and you want something, fresh and exciting and a little different, or if you've been thinking about getting into Path to Glory, but Ascension doesn't look interesting enough, this is definitely a book for you. It's super cool.
And I know one of the benefits to this particular book as well is what I've heard from the Path to Glory community is how hard it can be to maintain an ongoing campaign. Nothing is unique to tabletop. You talk to any D&D campaign and how often they crumble and collapse. But this is a nice little system that allows you to play and play for a long period of time. But also there's a really good endpoint too. So for someone who wants to game master and kind of set up something in their community, this is a relatively self-contained little book. And we're going to talk about all these things. So we just want to give you the high level of what this is. Great point around the fact it is different to the Ascension pack. So it's something completely different. It still taps into the core rules, and we'll talk about all this stuff. But it is a lovely little self-contained thing that, I keep saying it's really cool because it actually genuinely is actually cool. So even if you're not playing Path to Glory and you're Path to Glory curious, or you've got kids and you want to introduce them into a game system, or you've got friends, actually, again, I keep saying the word cool because it is cool, honestly. So we won't spill the beans too much on the lore, but what stood out to you from a lore perspective? So I love Akshi as a realm, and I remember seeing this map for the first time, wait a second, this is not that highly detailed map of Akshi that I have seen in Soulbound. What is going on here? Anything you want to share at this particular point, Manny, before I kind of go into True Pass Tough lore mode?
So the lore in here, I would say, it's very micro scale. It's effectively following the lore equivalent of a couple of Path to Glory armies. So it's a bunch of, cute, shorter, smaller stories about these different warbands and their adventures.
Yeah, and it obviously allows you to tell your own story. So, you are set in the realm of Akshi. There's going to be a bunch of Akshi rules that allow you to bring out that fiery realm and bring that to life. And, for anyone who's been following the lore, you'll notice that this whole area, that's these shifting lands, the Ravaging Coast, is definitely corrupted by Warpstone and by Skaven and a lot of stuff that's happened. Really quick call out, that second paragraph there, you'll notice is you'll see the 4 stories. You've got these Gorewater, and you've got the Lord Celestin, and we don't have to play them. They're clearly optional little pieces that are tied through the lore. But what you can tap into is a Regiment of Renown as well. So each of the 4 Grand Alliances has access to building your own one little model that we'll share a little bit later. But again, it's enough detailed that allows you to get into the lore, but still tell a story of your army, what it's trying to achieve, what you try to do with the Emberstone. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I love these deep dives into the mortal realms. We need more of it. Anything else?
No.
You're saying into the rules, right? Let's get into the rules. Let's get into the lore is great, but we don't want to spoil the lore for you. You read it, you enjoy it. But let's get into probably the first part, right, which is going to be building that Path to Glory roster. So, Maddie, tell me a little bit about the Path to Glory and how it works compared to potentially the Ascension, because there's probably a lot of people who are playing Ascension and they're like, right, how different is this going to be to how I build currently, and what do I gain or lose?
So it's actually completely different to Ascension. In Ascension, you build a roster of units that you could take, and then every battle you select your army from that pool. In Ravaged Coast, you play with all of your units every battle. So that force is what you're stuck with. And it doesn't necessarily come out to even points. You can actually end up with situations where one person's army has more points than the other person's, which is definitely interesting. But it does really make you think about what units you put in your roster and how you upgrade them, because you don't have the luxury of picking from your selection like you would in Ascension. You have what you have, and that's it. Another big thing about this battle pack is that you can actually make Grand Alliance soup effectively. You still have to pick a faction like normal. You also have to pick what subfaction you are, and that's also locked in the same way that your units are. But you can add heroes from any any faction in your Grand Alliance to your army, and then you can add things to that hero's regiment. So say you wanted to take, your OBR army. You could then decide, I want to add a necromancer, and we'll add some zombies and skeletons to that necromancer's regiment. So you can really play around with interesting combinations of units that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to take. They don't get, your army's keyword or anything, so a lot of abilities won't necessarily interact with them, but there's still definitely some fun and interesting combos you can do.
Definitely allows you to tell your story and build your roster. I know when we were looking at that potential unbalance of armies and lists, there is an interesting mechanic that basically if you are over points compared to your opponent, and there's a bunch of limits, you just put them into like an ambush kind of style. So it's not like I get to deploy 1,500 points and Maddie puts on 1,100 and there's a big gap. I will have to put some things off onto the side, and there's a whole bunch of rules. So they do try to balance it out. But I think the other part as well is that as the campaign goes along and you're adding extra units to your force, they're also accruing injuries that can be quite brutal. Like when we were looking at the injury table, there is some significant injuries where you're like, you know what, I might be better off retiring this unit and then go and trying to buy some more with my Emberstone. So it's not going to be basically who can build the biggest army quickest. It's going to be injury mitigation. It's going to be capturing spells and prayers to be in your arcane tome. It's going to be, really fighting over those Emberstone resources to make the most of your faction, allow you to do your thing.
For sure. There's a lot of different upgrades and, cogs you can turn. And individual units can become pretty powerful too. Some of the paths are exceedingly strong. So
yeah, really cool, especially for people who don't have their battle tomes yet. Like you've got a whole bunch of hero and units. Again, we will get to that at that particular moment. But again, very cool. Anything else you call out on the roster building side?
Yeah, with the Emberstone as your resource. So in Apotheosis, you have two separate resources: glory points, which are used for upgrading, like your army as a whole. So that's how you get new units. That's how you reinforce units. And then Renown, which is what you would use to upgrade individual units, like to put them on a path. Here, those are both the same resource, Emberstone shards, which I think presents an interesting dynamic of, do you want to build wide and add more units to your roster, reinforce your units, or do you want to build tall and upgrade the units you do have?
It's a good point. Really good point. Yeah, they synergize really nicely. So it's not like a one or the other. And there's a conversion table as well. So know that that's happening. There's a whole bunch of really cool, unique things. There is, some spells, there's some prayers, but we've got some hero traits. So depending on what faction and what you like to build, there should be something here for you. Do you have any particular favorites or anything that, really stood out to you from like the hero trait perspective?
They're all pretty decent. Brash and Angry is pretty cool. It reminds me of Shalaxes. And remember that in Path to Glory, you're not limited to one trait, to one artifact. So all of your heroes can potentially be getting artifacts and traits. So sometimes it's not about, which one is the best. It's when every one of your heroes can have a trait if they want. It's finding the one that suits each individual hero and how they work together.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And there's a whole bunch of things as well, like maybe one of the other key differences, one of the many differences when we get to the spells for a second, is you don't automatically start with this stuff. It's not like Match and Play where I automatically get artifacts, I automatically get spells, and I know the whole spell lore. I'm accumulating these slowly, either as I'm adding a wizard to my roster or a priest to my roster, or I am acquiring them over time. So these things are not just automatic. So again, while your selections, your list building, your Emberstone, and all those things are going to be important, but with a good pick. Try to remember, do you start with a heroic trait, or is that something that you gain?
Start with a trait and an artifact, and also one unlimited spell, and then when you add a wizard or priest, you get another free one.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, cool. Anything else? Sorry, I should jump back to hero trait for a second. Again, I assume most people have played Match Play in some perspective, or they've played Path to Glory. They're used to this mechanic. For me, like if I was going to start with one, I think the Words of Blazing Power is definitely one that I'm drawn to. Getting that +1 to cast, especially because you're not picking unique heroes, right? So they're probably starting off with very basic magic. So for me, I love that. Sorry, I've got to go into my old Match Play competitive. What's my favorite? That stands out for me.
Yeah, and I mean, you still have access to your faction ones too. Obviously, these are just a little extra, especially since factions only have 3. So once you start adding more heroes, and those all start getting enhancements, having a bigger pool to pick from is pretty important.
Yeah, but you know what? We're playing in Actually. We wanna have some Actually themed stuff. So
yeah,
I'm really deep in the lore. I love this. You've got a whole bunch of artifacts here. The Axe of Boiling Wrath, the Wrath Mock Blade. Again, some really cool thematical things. Like, I don't know if you want to say anything in particular about them. Again, I'm sure each of the list builders are looking at this going, "Oh, I'd love to add this on this particular hero," or "I'd love to acquire this one first." And obviously, each artifact is going to be important to different armies at different times. Anything that you'd say on this particular point?
I think the Warp Mock Blade is my favorite. I feel like that's got a lot of potential for wacky shenanigans.
I like the Magmic Key. This once per battle little teleport. Depending on what faction you play and what access you've got, that might be a nice little way to get yourself out of trouble, especially for, again, when you see the injury system, you're like, oh, I don't want my hero getting injured. I'm out of here. But yeah, right. Like again, there's some really cool things. The other one, the carved Magmadroth horn, really stands out to me. Again, you don't have as many bodies on the table, so getting more troops in and getting the rally is gonna, I imagine, help a lot.
That's not necessarily true. You're starting at around 1,000. That's suggested, but okay, sorry, anywhere. But sometimes you'll end up getting to point totals that are higher than 2K, just as you progress. So, mix.
I just still like the extra rally.
Yeah, I mean, it's still good. Yeah, especially if you have ways to rally multiple times a turn, or there's recursion and stuff. You can make some pretty durable blocks.
Yeah. Really quickly then, it looks like we probably don't have too much to say, but again, there's a very cool spell lore, very, very generous, a lot of 6s, a lot of 7s. There is this Embodied by Blaze that's casting value of 8, so not bad at all being able to get someone to strike last. Again, pick and choose what works for you, but again, I think
that's not a strike last spell. It gives you strike last, but it's you get to fight with the unit you target immediately in the hero phase, so it's very strong.
The target has strike last for the rest of the turn.
Read the sentence before that.
No, that doesn't matter.
That's the important part.
Don't fight with the rules layer here, folks. Yes, the target can immediately use the fight abilities. The combat phase, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. So it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the 5-up ward. There's the some D3 mortal damage. There's the subtract 2 for a run and charge rolls. There's a whole bunch of things that you can tap into. Again, pick and choose what works for you. Oh, the other thing as well, Maddie, we didn't say is you don't get your faction terrain automatically as well. So
if pretty much everything you have to upgrade over time.
Yeah. So there's probably one other difference, at least for the competitive people. Like, well, that's something you don't get.
Another important thing about the spell lores, lores work very differently in Path to Glory since you don't select a lore. You have that arcane tome where you're adding to it over time with individual spells. So you don't have to pick between this and your faction's lore. You can mix and match. It's capped at 6 total, but you could, say you wanted Embody the Blaze and Flaming Blades, and then Fire Cloak, and then your spell lore from your faction. You could have that. Or you could just end up with this entire spell lore, or you could have, 2 from your faction and 2 from here. You can mix and match however you want.
Yeah, and once you pass the 6 spells in your Arcane Tome or 6 prayers in your Arcane Tome, you just got to remove one. So if you find that, that's totally cool as well.
I do think to an extent it favors armies that only have one or the other, because if you have spells and prayers, that pool of 6 is shared between them.
Yeah. Because it's 6 spells and or prayers.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then speaking of prayers, you've then got your prayer lore. Again, a lot of chanting value 4s there, and a whole bunch of options. Anything in particular that really stands out to you, or anything you'd say from a prayer lore perspective?
A lot of these are also pretty strong, like cauterization, being able to churn off, crit 2 hits or crit mortal. That's really good. +1 to wound, that's not a super common buff, so that's nice to have. I think those are big here. Leaping Embers is also pretty nice. Big charge buff. They do all chant on 4s, so I think they're a little less generous than the spells in terms of chanting value. But they're strong effects, so.
I mean, even like Trail of Lava, right? Depending on your faction, you got a bunch of cavalry, like retreat and charge or retreat, shoot and charge as well, which is very, very cool. Again, all very useful. But to your point, it's that balancing that arcane tome. So what works best for you, and maybe to your point, just stick to one. But if you do as a Cane or Stormcast, well, why not do both?
And they're all very generically applicable options too. So a lot of different factions are gonna, get use out of these. They're not specific.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. But again, very cool prayer lore, very cool spell lore, a bunch of cool artifacts, a bunch of cool hero traits you can tap into. Again, I can start building up that roster, that faction, the way that I want to start questing into the realms. Now, the part that's really important, right? Because this is the key difference between a one-off battle that happens at the game store at a tournament and then what actually happens in a Path to Glory game is this aftermath sequence. So, Maddie, what on earth is an aftermath sequence?
So the aftermath sequence is what you go through after your battle that lets you actually upgrade your army and your units. It's what makes it a campaign as opposed to just that one battle. So you'll get shards, which are, again, the currency of this campaign. If you played Path to Glory before, they stand in for both glory points and renown. And you can see everything you can do with those there. You can promote your heroes, buy enhancements, embark on a path, reinforce existing units. So you've got everything that you're doing here, you will usually be spending Emberstone shards on.
Yeah, and it's also Emberstone shards are also important to progress through the campaign. So when you get to the battle plans, yes, there's 12 battle plans that you can play on, but it's structured in a way that basically you start on the outskirts and eventually start moving towards the Hell's Crown. And you need certain amount of Emberstone collected in order to progress into, I guess, the end state. So fighting over Emberstone, which are going to be sitting on the battle plan, also giving you points depending on, to your point, if you've won, if you've lost, if you've drawn. So there is a way to collect these up to build up. So again, when you're playing the battles, there might be situations where you're fighting over and trying to mine the Emberstone on the table versus engaging into combat, or maybe going for an objective and things. So there is a lot of interplay there with this this Emberstone mechanic. Anything else? Anything else?
The way you pick Emberstone shards up to on the battlefield as well. So it also creates an interesting dynamic while you're playing, because you're also competing for these meta resources during the game.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure we've got it on the document here, but like the way the Emberstone kind of works is, you know, there'll be Emberstone tokens on the battlefield. You've got to get a unit to basically mine for it. You roll a dice, but if that unit dies, they just drop it. And if I kill you in combat, then I'll take it off you if I don't already collect it. So, you know, getting to it early, then you've got to protect that resource, and if you hold it, you start taking damage as well. So there's a lot of cool, fun mechanics that goes through the Emberstone piece as well. So, and you can see on the right-hand side as well, you can start promoting heroes, you can change your general, you can change the unit's path. There's a whole bunch of things you can do to manage this campaign, and it makes it more than just that one-off battle.
Should we get into the details?
Well, just creating the opportunity for you to say anything else. I'm trying to be all right. So let's go spending, Maddie. Let's pull out the wallet and go spending. So anything you want to say here at this particular point? Because clearly, you know, once I collect them, I can start spending them. You can see here on the screen artifacts or enhancements, recruit warriors, get that terrain feature, hire that Regiment of Renown. It's not the other Regiments of Renown, so the Gloomspite gets one, or like any of the ones you know today, they are not on the table. But you do have a very specific, unique Ravaging Coast Regiments of Renown available, 1 to each Grand Alliance.
Yeah, so lots of options here. Paths, you don't get the ones in Ascension, but the 16 in here or the ones in your battle tome, those are all eligible. So you can either start a new one or go farther along that. Enhancement, spell, or prayer. It's actually specifically artifact or heroic trait right now that really needs errata, because if you're playing Slaves to Darkness, you can't get ensorcelled banners or first circle titles, so those I imagine will get fixed. Spells and prayers, yeah, straightforward to add those. Adding units or reinforcing units. One thing that's important to note about that, you can't recruit multiple in the same aftermath sequence, and you can't like recruit a unit at reinforced size. So when you're going through that campaign, it sort of acts as a little bit of a limiter, since you're only ever going to go up by 1 unit, win or lose. You can't, even if you are very ahead in Emberstone shards, you can't just make your army completely huge.
Which is only a good thing, right? Like the last thing you want to do is somebody, let's say like game 1, you know, you get all the Emberstone tokens on the table, you win a major victory on the battle, you clearly have a lot of currency. That spending cash and getting a whole bunch of units just in game 1 would make a huge discrepancy to the campaign. So that limitation keeps it fair and even, and actually quite cool.
Correct. There's always been, I would say, a little bit of a snowball effect between all the upgrades you can give your units, and especially here when you can have uneven forces. So it's a pretty important limiter to have.
Very good. And you know what? Like I love the Regiments of Renown. You know, getting yourself that extra spell or enhancement. Again, there's a lot of great options. Pick and choose what works for you. But really good point out. It says there each action can only be performed once in the aftermath sequence. And even the recruit warriors, it says add units to your roster or reinforce. You can't have both. Very, very good pickup. Then the thing that we've kind of alluded to a few times, and the one that I think you and I first went, ooh, what is this? We have injuries. Maddie, tell me more about injuries and what does it mean to you and, you know, from your experience from Ascension?
So yeah, Ascension does not have injuries. If you played Path to Glory in 3rd edition, you might remember injuries, but these are completely different. Instead of your unit just starting the game with some damage marked on it, they actually have like unique passive abilities. So depending on the level of injury they have, there's a table for each. And, you know, they might be things like this unit can't be healed or this unit can't run or retreat. So they're all relatively debilitating. Back in 3rd edition, you didn't really care too much if your units died. Like, oh no, if it starts the game a little bit damaged, who cares? But here, since those can really add up, it's pretty brutal, and there's no way to remove them once you have a battle scar. So you really want to make sure your units don't get destroyed. And then also you really want to, if you do, you know, get destroyed and take battle wounds, you really want to make sure to heal those battle wounds off before you start accumulating scars.
Yeah, so a really good couple of points here is, first off, you start off taking, I guess, wounds. You're taking these battle wounds. Then when you start hitting your tiers, so you can see 5 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 to 17, and then 18 is just you're gone. Once you've hit serious, so each of these have 3. So basically you roll a die. So when I hit the serious battle scar, I roll a d6, and there are 3 options. On a 1 to 2, for example, at the end of the battle round, a battle roller dies. On a 5 up, they suffer d3 battle wounds. On a 3 to a 4, the damage points allocated to this unit can't be healed. And then on a 5 and 6, subtract 1 from run rolls and charge rolls for this unit. Now, when you heal, and let's say I go from 5 to 3 or 5 to 4, it doesn't mean that battle scar has been removed. But when I re-enter that battle scar of Sirius, I can't get another one. I can only ever get one debuff or one ability per battle scar as I go through it. So severe, serious, critical. So what Maddie said around like healing and bringing them back and keeping them away from those tiers, because even though they seem like you can manage around that, when you start getting into like critical, for example, has strike last, subtract 1 from attack characteristics. Each time you declare a non-core ability for this unit on a 5 up, it has no effect. And then even Sirius has some, you know, this unit can't retreat and run, for example. So they can be brutal. And maybe where you go, look, they've taken too many wounds, I'm going to retire the unit and get some cash.
Yeah, some of them are really debilitating, especially depending on, you know, what it's on. If your wizard has strike last, you might not care very much. But if it has the one that has a 5 up to have no effect for non-core abilities, that's not a very helpful wizard anymore.
No, or even, for example, like Endless Chittering, which is a 5 and a 6 on Severe. Basically on a 4 up, when you spend a command, it basically doesn't work and you've lost the command point. So that can be brutal as well. So again, depends on who gets it and how important those those rules are. Maybe that unit was never going to charge, so -1 to charge, who cares?
Yeah.
But
dice roll, so you never know.
It's very, very cool to see, again, the long-term effects and, again, why you might not want to be in combat all the time, like retreat out, get out. I like it. I like this a lot.
I think it's the most interesting injury system we've had so far.
Reminds me of Mortime a lot. Like, I had some really funny, interesting injuries on some of my Mortime people. So getting that again, and then until you get one that's like really brutal, you're like, I hate this system. But no, it's still generally fun. This is also fun, Maddie. Tell me more about the paths, something that I haven't really played around with too much.
So paths are effectively skill trees for units, sort of. You can spend Emberstone to pick a path for a unit. And then each path has 4 different tiers, going from aspiring to legendary. And then each tier has 2 different abilities you can pick from. So as you progress down that path, you can get a total of 4 abilities. And, obviously the legendary ones are super strong. The aspiring ones are, they're good, but it's as you progress down that path that you get stronger and stronger abilities for your unit. And you've got a lot of options for paths to pick from here, so you can really customize your units pretty heavily. And obviously different abilities, work better on different units. So like some examples, Path of the Warmonger. One of the aspiring traits is this unit can't be targeted by shooting attacks while it's in combat, or like +10 to control score while it's in combat, versus the legendary ones. If it fought, give it +1 attack for the rest of the battle. Or for each, roll a die for each enemy unit in combat with it on a 2-up, +1 rend for the rest of the phase. So you can see how both of those are a lot stronger, and that entire path is themed around being in combat, or like foot heroes fighting. Or if you look at like Path of the Conjurer, that's all about, summoning endless spells, banishing endless spells.
Literally the page I had up. That's literally the. I'm like, I can't wait for Maddie to stop for a second. I'm like, I'm looking at this going, right, if I'm a conjurer, I can either start off with aspiring with like +1 casting or +2 to banishment. And then kind of as it builds up, you can get to like Supreme Conjurer, which is a legendary piece that changes the casting roll for the spell value to 8 that can't be modified. And you can set up manifestations on the battlefield wholly within 6 inches of this unit. Like, there's a whole bunch of cool things. There's a new ability called Castigator, which is a movement phase ability. But again, you can kind of see to what Maddie's saying, it's very thematical and it builds up as you're gaining up these paths to be legendary. And I love the fact that there's one for beasts. Like, get myself a unit of doggos from the Griffhounds and let's get them to legendary status where they either have a 5-up ward or they can ignore the first damage point, or they can't be picked for rampage abilities or +1 to charge. There's some cool stuff in here.
And you sort of got that same choice here of, do you want to go tall and try to get a few of your most important pieces to legendary as quickly as possible? Or do you want to go wide and get those, aspiring and elite traits on as many of your units? And a lot of times it really depends, like what units do you have in your army? What paths work well on them? What's their role? You probably don't necessarily need paths on your like Fellbats or Aether Wings. There is Path of the Pack for them, but that might not necessarily be as useful as buffing up like your big centerpiece hero or your main hammer or whatever other unit you have.
Pick and choose what works for you. But I just love that the options are here. You've got 2 for your hero, 2 for your infantry, 2 for your wizards, 2 for your priest, and then there's something for everyone. Monster hero, cavalry hero, beasts, war machine, you name it. There's literally something here for everyone. I love you pick and choose something that works for you. It's inclusive.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
It's a
Anyone?
huge step up in the number of them too. Ascension has 4. 2 for heroes, 2 for non-heroes, I believe. So this having 10 hero paths and 6 non-hero paths is huge in terms of like variety and options.
And you said I can use, if I've got a battle tome one, I can use those as well, right? So
Yep. Each battle tome has 1 for heroes, 1 for non-heroes so far. So those are just in addition to your options here.
yeah, sick. That's great. And the other part that I think is fascinating is you've got this thing called the Emberstone Forge. So you can essentially spend 2 Ember shards that you've gained to I don't want to say the word improve. I almost said the word improved. It is modify the weapon on your heroes. So you can modify the weapon, either a ranged weapon or a melee weapon. This is a really interesting high-risk, high-reward mechanic, and we'll share a little bit more on the next page. But Maddie, tell me about what your interpretations were on the Emberstone Forge.
So these were really weird. They're a special kind of artifact that replaces one of your existing weapons with one of these Emberstone weapons. You can see the base profiles there, but then there's a random 2d6 table. Here's the chart of what happens to that base profile. And there's caps on the max, so you can't get too crazy, but you can get some very interesting weapons.
I'm going to roll 2 dice right now, okay? I'm going to roll 2 dice,
see
okay? All right, I'm just going to roll it, and then you tell me the number, what it does. So the first roll, I rolled a 2.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on the 2 column. Now the second roll was a 5. Oh,
failure. I don't know.
No joke. So I've just spent 2 of my Emberstone tokens for an absolute failure. So it does a whole bunch of nothing. But you can see here that not only am I changing the weapon profile to what Maddie said around, I now have, it's because this is not in addition to what I have. It's now going, right, well, this has replaced it. And then you could get some really cool things. You get anti-hero, get yourself an extra melee range on your ranged attacks, get crit auto wounds. But then also you can see -1 to hit and +2 to wound. Like there's some fascinating abilities that could actually work against you. So be careful if you forge.
I think the weirdest thing about these two to me is because they replace an existing weapon, you don't necessarily want them on a hero who's actually good at combat. I feel like the best use for these is almost to like stick them on your foot wizard with a garbage staff and suddenly have it become a god. Because you're just ending up with, the discrepancy between your base War Scroll weapon and the forge weapon you make is so much higher on something that didn't have the good weapon to begin with compared to a hero that's actually made for combat.
Yeah.
Anvil heroes are another good use for an Emberstone weapon, since when you build your Anvil hero, you can skimp out on its weapons a little bit and then give it an Emberstone weapon to give it that glow up.
Which, by the way, there is no Anvil of Apotheosis in this book, but you absolutely can use them. So to avoid any confusion that may have happened from previous communication, you can use it. It just ain't in this book.
Yeah, no generic Anvil in here. So unfortunately, only the factions with battle tomes have an Anvil right now. But we'll get more coming out. So,
Buddy, do you think it's worth spending the 2 Emberstone on something like this, or do you think it's better off putting a different unit on a path, looking to obviously reinforce a unit's always going to be powerful, but like, do you see this being something you use often or something that's a rare?
I don't think it's relatively niche in comparison, just because I think most of your heroes that you want in combat already have decent weapons. And most of your heroes that don't have decent weapons, you might not necessarily want in combat. I do think that anvil heroes are going to be a big use for these, because then you can have that big upgrade without, you can spend, when you're making your hero in the anvil, you can put all its points into defensive abilities, into buff abilities and stuff, and now it's weapons, and then here you can give it a good weapon. But like, if I wanted to put this on, just like a generic hero in my army, I don't necessarily know what I would pick compared to, like a path, for example. Forging an Emberstone weapon here is 2 shards, and embarking on a path is only 1. So for the price of one of these weapons, I could put 2 of my units onto a path, or I could upgrade one of my units to the 2nd rank, the elite path. So I think it's a little steep.
Yeah, I'm probably more tied to using some of these other abilities, hire that, Regiment of Renown, get those that faction terrain, like spend them on other pieces. If I have like this massive surplus, I might consider that, to your point. But yeah, I think the payoff, when I look at the weapon profile, depending on the faction that you're running, like you might be trading off too much already on the base weapon. And then you add the risk of this, like, I'd rather go path, I'd rather go somewhere else. But again, each faction, each hero, I'll leave it up to everyone.
On top of that, too, they're unstable. So after every battle, you roll a d6, and on a 1, the weapon explodes. So not only are they a relatively steep investment, they're also a risky one. Versus, something like a path, you're not going to lose unless your unit dies, which, if you're managing your battle wounds, it should.
It is a risk that I would not want to take. But you know what? If I have some little minor hero, maybe I get that Hobgrot Slitter boss and just put on a crazy artifact, and it's insane. I don't know. Speaking of Regiments of Renown and hiring Regiments of Renown, let's talk about this system. So, there's a Hobgrot Slitter. I didn't change the image. Anyway, well, actually, the image is the real one. It's all good. I just remembered I haven't changed it for the other ones, have I? No, I have not. Anyway, let it be whatever you want. So each of the Grand Alliances has an option that is going to be your Regiment of Renown. So basically, there's this one particular hero. Now, it's not a based hero, so you'll see examples in this book where they've used the Battlesmith, what's the order guy? I forgot.
The Warforger.
The Warforger. Thank you. I went Battlesmith. Like, no, I know it's not the Battlesmith. So they've used the Warforger in the image. In Skaven, in the Chaos one, they've got a Skaven. Is it OBR, they've used an OBR image. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is when you look at the book, they've given you examples of what you use for the Regiment of Renown, but it's basically a hero model from your collection that represents the Ravaged Coast Regiment of Renown, and it must be on a round base between a 32 and 50 mil. So you pick whatever you want to represent your Realmstone Innovator, your Warped Saboteur, your Sinister Nullifier, or your Weird Crafter. So they all have a very similar profile. So you'll see here the melee weapon doesn't change between any of them, but what will change is obviously the keywords and the ability here. So when you look at the order one, for example, we've got this field modification. So Maddie, let's talk overall. We've got the Realmstone Innovator, we have the Warp Saboteur, we have the Sinister Nullifier, and we have the Weird Crafter. Let's go back to order for a second. What are your thoughts on the Regiment of Renown? And if you were any of these factions, would you be considering adding this to your faction?
So all of them have this reroll forging roll ability. Forging rolls are the rolls we mentioned before to upgrade your Emberstone weapons. So if you're planning to invest into those Emberstone weapons, having your Regiment of Renown on hand to increase the chances that you roll something good can be handy. And then all the individual abilities sort of interact with the Emberstone weapons. So this one, pick a hero that has an Emberstone weapon, and you can get either +1 to hit or do damage yourself. So again, if you are investing into those Emberstone weapons, it could be a good thing to have.
Do you want to go to the other ones?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
They're not.
Because a lot of them are similar, right? Because you're going to notice, right? Even though, I'm just going to skip through them for a second, watch the melee weapon profile. Even though the name is going to change, it is literally the same profile. Yep. So the melee doesn't change. The characteristics of move and save doesn't change. Obviously, the inclusion changes, but you'll notice that the inclusion, the abilities...
Yep.
Yeah. The abilities, the inclusion, and the everything kind of stays the same. It's just this field modifications, Arcane Saboteur, Smothering Presence, and Try Dis on for size. These are all the things that are just changing. You're basically getting an ability.
Yeah, and if you look through them, so 2 of them sort of buff your Emberstone weapons, the Order and the Destruction one, versus the Chaos and the Death one are sort of anti-Emberstone weapon tech. The Chaos one, it damages enemy units with an Emberstone weapon. The Death one gives you a ward against Emberstone weapons. So I think that the Order and the Destruction ones will probably be taken more often because you can control, whether you have Emberstone weapons, and so that if you take these, your buff is going to do something. Versus the Chaos and Death ones, they only really have an effect if your opponent is investing into Emberstone weapons, which might make them a little less worth it. Because I don't think everyone will be focusing heavily into those.
The Chaos one is quite powerful when you look at the fact that you can basically shut them off completely. And that's obviously a resource they've paid for. But on the flip side, to your point, the dependency here is that you've got it. If people don't do it and you can't get, within 6 of them, then this unit's potentially wasted.
Strong effects, just niche.
Yeah. Not auto-include, fun. I can't wait to see the kit bashing that happens off the back of this and how people represent these models in the game. Either use something in the faction, kit bash it. There is no, even though, again, they've got particular models in the book, you don't have to go and buy those particular models. You do you, as long as it sits on that appropriate base size that you spoke about earlier. Anything else about, well, we get straight to the campaign?
Being on the campaign, yeah.
Cool. So, Regiments of Renown, fun, cool. Now we're getting to the campaign. So, this is where the secret sauce happens because it turns from one particular battle into many battles. Maddie, how does this differ or how does this work and maybe introduce a few things that may be unique or special compared to the Ascension pack that people might be familiar with?
Yeah, so Ascension doesn't quite have a enclosed campaign. It's more freeform in that you just fight whatever battles you want. It gives you some battle plans, but you could also fight on General's Handbook battle plans or First Blood battle plans or really whatever you wanted. There's no real structure to it. This is more of a proper campaign in that there's 3 different tiers of battle plans and then a final battle. And as you go through this campaign, you start on Scorched Outskirts and you're trying to go and eventually win on Hell's Claw once you get there, which I think is neat because it makes it feel more connected, more like a campaign. And from a logistical perspective, one of the things that happens a lot with, Path to Glory groups is sometimes, people fall off or people lose motivation, and having that sort of distinct, there's a goal to reach, I think really helps with that, because you're not just playing to get stronger, you're playing to win on Hell's Claw.
Yeah, that's critical. Like when you look at any of them, like, I've been looking at, Malign's Portents, which was a campaign that we've run. There was Thondia. There has been so many campaigns that are very match play orientated. Again, I keep going back to Dungeons and Dragons, picking up a D&D campaign. You've got a start, you've got an end, you've got to build archetype to eventually, hopefully get to that particular point. It's always nice to beat that final boss, to accumulate the resources and build towards something. And, while a freeform D&D campaign can be really powerful and creative, and certainly you can adjust your campaign to however you want to do this, this is a really good sandbox. It allows us, the players, to play in that sandbox, to do our thing. And to your point, give me those milestones, right? Once I've got those 20 Emberstone shards, I can start moving onto the hate-filled shores. I can start progressing into, getting those major victories will allow me to get into the Hell's Claw. I've got something to work towards rather than, why am I playing this? What's the end goal? I'm getting bored of this. One of the many challenges that anyone who's run a game system or a campaign has probably felt. So I dig in a lot. And we've talked a lot about this uneven armies. This is the rule. So you can start to see here, once that a faction has over 200 points or more of their opponent, more than their opponent, you have this rule called stalled reinforcement. So basically, you got to put on a certain amount of points over to the side, and then you start rolling the dice on a 4 up to bring in from reserve. So that helps keep it, air quote, balanced.
And obviously, you've still got the imbalance of you can start with up to 200 points more, and if you get lucky, your units can still get on the board and be overwhelming if you just roll those 4-ups. But it does help keep it from being completely debilitating. And as we mentioned, only being able to recruit one unit or reinforce one unit in the Aftermath sequence also helps dampen that snowball down a little bit.
Yeah, I just want to put a focus on that because it is different to Ascension, where, as you said, you've got a roster to pick from and you pick and choose. This one does have a mechanic that you just need to be thinking of, and maybe why you might spend or always spend points on reinforcing or adding new units to your army, rather than immediately going into and getting that extra artifact or that the Emberstone, forge. Maybe hold that off till a little bit later in the game because you don't want to get this uneven army system happening against you.
Another thing to note about that, regarding the Regiments of Renown, the Regiments of Renown in here don't have points, so they don't count towards that limit.
Yes, true. Very true. They do not have points on here. So that's actually a really good observation. I didn't think about that. Anything else on the battle pack? I mean, the battle packs are fun. Probably the one thing that we noticed, I know you made a comment before we went live, Maddie, was the battle plans, and I might bring it up in a second just to, visually see it. They're not overly complicated battle plans. Like when you look at the actual, the maps, for example, they're not the most complicated. They're certainly not, like, if you look at, like, there's some really cool deployment maps. It's not like you've got these crazy 4th edition, highly complex, things to do. And they're kind of cool. Like, they are pretty cool. Andy, you'd say on the battle plans, Maddie?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are relatively simple because of how much else you're managing during the battle. So, the battle plans themselves might be a simple kill more things than your opponent, or there's one objective and whoever controls it at the end of the battle wins. But there is a twist table, which actually works. I would say the closest analogy is Spearhead, in that there's a different twist every round.
Yeah.
So you roll for the table at the beginning of the game. And then every round, you roll on that table to see what twist comes into play. So it reminds me a little bit of the decks that Spearhead uses for the twist.
Yeah, so we've got some examples on the screen, by the way. So like that's not the only ones. There's definitely a whole bunch of them available to you. But there's some fun, interesting, damaging, but not brutal. I don't think that any of the twists are really brutal, but like, so, I mean, the ones that I picked are a little bit more aggressive than the others.
Yeah, so those just spice it up, you know. And also then if you're playing, you know, you don't necessarily know what to expect, which because a lot of those battle plans are a lot simpler, the added just element of surprise can help. And then on top of that, like I mentioned before, you are also trying to get those Emberstone tokens during the battle. You have those set up on the field, and those don't necessarily benefit you in the game, but they will help you with that meta progression in order to, you know, upgrade your units and stuff. So they're sort of striking that balance of, do I want to go towards the like progressing the objectives of the battle plan, or do I want to try to go for some of those Emberstone tokens so that, you know, I can get a little bit more benefit in the aftermath sequence.
Yeah, and you can see here that there are some unique abilities in the battle pack. Speaking of Emberstone, so you can dig for Emberstone. So there's a whole bunch of Emberstone on the table. And then you can see the ability there, end of the final battle, you can start digging for sites if you can control it. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of things. So there's some very cool abilities. There's another one as well. And then Fill with Fury, which is a fascinating one, which while you have an Emberstone token, you subtract one from your save roll, add one to wound roll. There's another ability as well. Yeah. Where is it? Sorry. Got it on screen. The
action anger?
Yeah, that's literally what I was looking for. Action anger. So when you use all out attack command, in addition to adding +1 to hit, your opponent gets +1 to hit. I guess you're a bit angry and a little bit open to being hit back in return. So the action anger is certainly fun.
And then some of the higher tier battle plans also have that poison domain where if you're near terrain, you might take damage.
Yeah, if you roll a 1, you inflict D6 damage to you. And also, even though I've got Emberstone dig sites on the side here, through the game, you can also dig for Emberstone. So there's another rule called Collect Emberstone, where once per turn in the end of your turn, you can basically mine for an Emberstone. On a roll of a 1, you take D3 and the cluster is removed. On a roll of a 2 to a 6, you gain the cluster. So you can only ever hold one cluster at a time. But know that if that unit dies, it'll drop it and create a new cluster. Or if you're in combat, you give that cluster to the enemy that killed you unless they already have a cluster. So again, you want to get these resources. We've seen a lot of benefits by having the resources, but if you're going to have them, protect them. So maybe why you might want to have some skirmishing units that can go in, grab it, fast get out, you know, protect that as much as possible, rather than maybe your combat melee, or maybe put the target on their head too. Those shooting units are now chasing down the Emberstone from your opponent. I guess there's so much little interplay mechanics here with winning the game, getting the renown or getting the Emberstone, protecting yourself.
For sure. Another thing that really makes you need to think about what you're doing is battles have variable length. So they're not necessarily 5 rounds like they are in matched play. They can end up being 4, 5, or 6. So at the end of the 4th battle round, you roll a die, and on a 1-2, battle ends there. At the end of the 5th, you roll a die, and then on a 1 through 4th, battle ends. And then 6th, you're just done. So you need to be preparing, when you're digging these clusters, when you're trying to go for the primary objective. You don't necessarily know how long you have left. So you can't necessarily accurately calculate, like, oh, I'll be safe if I do this. You need to sort of weigh the cost-benefit ratio and prep for, either occurrence.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember we were talking about this very, very early on, and I remember it standing out to me. And I literally just forgot in the thick of things. But yes, that the fact that this could be 4 battle rounds, could be 5, could be 6. It's all dice roll dependent. So again, getting those Emberstone, getting out, retaining them. How do you protect them? How do you reach out and get to your opponent who might have those Emberstone and get the late game benefits off them? I guess there's so many little interesting things that could happen on the table, and why when you then add the layers of the battle plan. By the way, when you look at the battle plans, I know we said they were simpler, and I actually don't mind them being simpler because of that Emberstone mechanic. But then when you go into, I'll bring it up, when you bring into the final boss fight, this Raiders on Hellclaw, oh my gosh, so many rules. It is truly a Final Fantasy boss fight when it comes to ending this campaign.
A lot of them have really funky, split deployments, uneven deployments. Some of them even have uneven victory conditions. So even though they're relatively simple, they're not boring.
Can I see one of my favorite ones? It's so stupid. This one here. It reminds me of like a foot race. It's like you and I, who's going to get the first. It's like a relay, right? Grab the baton, but we get to push each other along the way and stop each other. There's a lot of cool, fun things. And even like this one, like split the territories there. Like, again, a lot of great little interplay. And I think people who buy this book are going to have fun. And this is partially why, like when I said to you guys at the start of this video, I don't play Path to Glory. People have been asking me to do videos on Path to Glory. I've never done them. I don't play it. But when I look at this actually might be the reason I'd start playing. It's like, you know what? It's cool. It's fun. It allows me to tell a story. It allows me to play in a sandbox. I know the end state. I know what I'm building towards. I'm not reliant on someone creating, a narrative, a grand narrative or lore around why we're all doing our things. I think this feels like it's easier to get my friends to play along with me because that's half of the fun, right? Getting a group of people who are discussing, who are playing. It takes me back to Mordheim. What got me into Mordheim, or why it's still one of my absolute favorite games, is the ongoing things, right? I think of the game Gorka Morka, again, a game I absolutely loved. Why? Because I could kick, bash, convert, do a whole bunch of crazy things like that siren. But like you tell stories, and this I think has hit the jackpot. I really dig this, and I hope it's successful and we see more of them. That's my honest opinion.
For sure. Especially, not just in terms of hacks, but this is sort of the first we've seen really interface with that modular system. So entirely new army composition rules. We could see a Path to Glory battle pack that has different magic rules, or, something else with army composition. Maybe it doesn't use regiments. There is so much untapped just design space here that they could play with. So yeah, I'm really excited for this and to see what else they come up with for it in the future.
Yeah, I think I look at this and I see potential, right? Like, I think, yes, the Ravaging Coast is great, but there's so many things in life, whether it's revisiting Gairan, like a very early realm that we looked into in first and second that hasn't gotten a lot of love. Like, actually has definitely gotten more love. But go to Gairan. Let's look at some of the other realms. I know Ulgu, and there's so many realms that we want to go into. This I think will start the conversation around more Black Library books, more people curious about the lore, and I think it's an easy pack to get your friends in. I think it's a nice little refresh for people who are like, maybe not burnt out but competitive, but they want something a little different. Or for those people who are, absolute people who love telling this story and they're playing Path to Glory. I think this is something for everyone. So whether you buy it or not is clearly up to you guys. But I think if you buy this book, you will enjoy it. I think you will enjoy it.
For sure.
Is it perfect? No, but like it's a bloody cool
It's
book,
fun.
and it's bloody cool, and I'd love to see more of them. Maddie, any final thoughts? I've literally just given you a TED talk. Again, if you want to buy it, go buy it. I've mentioned the affiliate partners down below: Walkfire Minis, Element Games, and Gap. Appreciate it, but I think for people who are going to buy it, we're always going to buy it. People who are curious about it, I hope you at least know more about the book. And between Maddie and I've got really not a lot of idea. Maddie's got a lot of experience. You've got a better idea of what to expect. And for anyone who's curious about Path to Glory, you might dip your toes in. You might buy the book. You might go watch someone play. You might come into my Discord and there's a whole bunch of Path to Glory chats and things going on, and you might learn more and maybe you dip your toe in later.
People run campaigns in there sometimes too. You can organize it too a bunch of different ways, because with the system, you don't necessarily need one dedicated group. As long as everyone's using the same battle pack, you can play with anyone who has, a Ravaged Coast army. So you could play that way. I think it works a little better if you do have a dedicated group, because you can then, either you can go and say like, oh, Wednesday's our gaming day when we're all going to go to the LGS and hang out. Or you can try to have like a schedule. Okay, everyone plays, one game a week. You could pair people up that way. Try to make it so that people have maybe opponents that are at a similar points level with them. So, logistically, there's sort of a lot of different ways you can organize it. Having at least one person in the group who's played before definitely helps with that. But it's not necessary. It's pretty easy to figure out. Having a spreadsheet is pretty good to track your army roster. The book includes one you can photocopy.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think a spreadsheet just makes it a lot easier, especially with stuff like the Emberstone weapons, where, that can get pretty complex with all your different forging rolls, changing the stats on it. Or, when you're going down a path and you've got 4 different abilities, maybe an injury. So just having a good way to write that all down. And, if you do it in a spreadsheet, then you can share it with your gaming group and everyone can sort of see the overall progress. But there's always people looking. So even if you don't have an established group, I would say just try to find some people, There's always people looking, and people are generally pretty friendly, It's a good way to get into it.
I can see this being popular at game stores too. So if you've got a group of friends, you've got a club, that's great. But I can see, people do slow grow campaigns. This is a great way to do a slow grow. And it's a structured slow grow. To your point, you might reach out to the game store and say, hey, can we do this on a Wednesday night? Put out a fake Facebook post. And you never know who are playing Path to Glory or playing Small Hammer that aren't 2K kind of opponents, and you've just opened yourself up. So, again, this is why I'm curious. Like, for people who are always going to play match play, cool, keep doing your thing. Nothing's changed. This literally doesn't impact you. For those people who are looking for something a little different, maybe a break, maybe they don't play match play, maybe they're in a casual and don't want to keep up with the meta, this is also a great option. Or play Spearhead. You do you. Maddie, any final thoughts?
Oh, I feel like Spearhead and this occupied vastly different, niches of Path to Glory it's fun, but it is a little bit of a longer term commitment, I would say, compared to the very rapid format that is Spearhead.
What I'm saying is that there's a format for everyone.
It's true.
So there's match play, Path to Glory, Spearhead, or whatever it is, find your little niche.
Yeah.
It's a good book. I think I'm going to end it there. If there's nothing else that you want to say, again, we could have gone into a lot of detail, shared a lot about the lore, gone into the intricacies of things. But I think the benefit here is you all go grab this book, explore it for yourself, play it through, discuss it on my Discord, whatever you want to do. If you're going to go buy it, go buy it. If not, I hope you enjoyed this video. Maddie, you are a legend. Always appreciate our chats. Anything you want to say finally?
No, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to start a campaign with it. So,
all right. Final question for you then. Who is going to, what is going to represent your Regiment of Renown? So we know you're a notorious OBR player. You also dip your toes into anything that's Nagash. But what do you think you would do to create your regiment?
I don't know if I'll make one. I actually have a kit bashed. It's meant to be a soul mason that one of my friends made for me. But it's on the soul mason chair, and you know the code right? The little KO model that's holding the book. So it's got one of those on the soul mason chair with the soul mason hat. Yeah, the book is all painted up like it's a Warhammer book. And that's super cute. So
I haven't looked to anvils lately, but in second edition, I built basically my Morswig. So I'm wondering, I actually did Vince Venturella class as well to do blending on this model. So my point is that if it's an anvil system that allows me to run a monster, I might have to bring that back. But
Squig kit bashes are popular. I've seen 2 Squig Zinch armies and a Squig Ideneth army.
There's one in Australia. Really fun. There's one in Australia. There's a Squiggy kind of Zinch. They're cool. Everything's better with
one of the 2 I've seen. Yeah.
With Scott with Worlds.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think the converter in me is going to appreciate this. So
I've still got my Grand Necromystic to kit bash up too. So
that's that white
the
wolf thing, right?
Army of Renown, yeah.
Dig it. All right, we're going into a weird conversation. Path to Glory, Ravaged Coast, cool book. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed this preview. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. I hope your questions are answered, whether you dig it, it's not for you, whatever it is. I hope this helped form whatever opinion you were trying to form around the Ravaged Coast. Thank you again for sending this to me. I appreciate it. It was actually a really good book. I would have loved to not drop at the same time as the Auric Warclan book, but timing is timing. Happy holidays, Maddie, and I'll chat to you all again a little later.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spell cast.